if their life turns, your life will turn, Joey. Right? Like you're basically strapped to them. And there's a lot of truth there. I think that, human beings are volatile. With that being said, choose wisely. Make sure that your business partners are just as important as your wife.
Welcome back to the Abundant Journey podcast, everybody. Thank you for hanging out with us today. As always, you're stuck with Nick and Nick, and we love talking to people. We love having a good time hanging out with entrepreneurs. Nick, how are you, sir?
Hey, I am doing very well. We spent a week up in Canada last week, back in town now, back getting into catching up on work. And so this is the highlight of my week, to be able to step away from all of the email and things that have been pressing and to have a conversation with another one of our amazing guests. Nick, I'll let you introduce him.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. Hanging out with you, hanging out with guests, learning about their amazing stories is always one of the highlights of my week as well. For today, we got another Northwest guy, Joey Patino, and him and I got connected through my banking job, and we spent some time hanging out, talking, and quickly in that conversation, I said, this is a guy we got to have on the podcast because he's done some amazing things. So I won't steal his thunder and giving us the backstory of what he did. But Joey, thanks for hanging out. How are you, sir?
Well, thanks for having me on Double Nicks.
That's it. That's it.
Absolutely, man.
Well, Joey, I know you. Obviously, our guests don't. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what a day in the life looks like now. Who are you? What are you doing?
Well, I born and raised in Oregon, Oregon City boy. So my parents, they, bought some land in Oregon City back when I was 3 years old. Built a house. They still live in the same house. It's like that, the cliche story of, once you get the peace and quiet in the countryside, you never really leave. So, long story short, I went to Oregon City High School, and I knew that I wanted to be near Portland, and be in a city. I felt like there was more opportunities. Frankly, I like being around people, so I like the convenience. I learned pretty quickly that I'm not a city boy, but at the same time, I like the best of both worlds. So I ended up, landing in Hillsdale, which is like a nice little southwest suburb in Portland. Don't get some of the downsides of living in the city. And I get the upsides of the convenience, if you will.
Yeah.
So you want me to go into like my first job, and then kind of go from there, or what are you guys thinking?
Yeah, I mean, actually it'd be helpful even just kind of at a high level right now to just kind of what a day in the life looks like for you, just so that we know what you're doing at this moment, and then we'll kind of dive back into how you got here.
Sweet. Yeah. Okay. So we have so my business partners and I, we're six, fairly young, energetic entrepreneurs. We're all, fairly similar. All of us are different enough where we play different, roles, in our companies, but we have 5 companies together that work together in the Portland area. And we try to vertically integrate and be as, efficient as possible with what we do. So, the first tier of our business is the hospitality side. And we have, Airbnbs throughout the Portland metro. They're boutique hotels, but most people, whenever I say boutique hotel, they imagine the Marriott or the Hilton, pretty large brands, which it's quite the opposite of that. We use Airbnb as a marketing platform. And it's a wonderful app, super customer facing, client facing, and, frankly, they do all the marketing in the world, for us. So, gets our boutique hotels, out there into the world. So then we have the hospitality side, and that kind of runs into our management and cleaning company. So we self-serve all of our units. So we have, 70 cleaners on staff. We have, property managers, which is mainly us, but property managers that take care of, the properties. We have our own maintenance crew. And then going into the second tier of our business, which is the furniture side and design side. So we have a local furniture store, What's New Furniture, here in Portland. It's on the corner of Grand and Stark. And
nice location. It's cool.
We've had that for 12 years. So my in-laws actually owned that before. So we ended up, that was our last acquisition that we did in 2022. And to play off the furniture, we actually have a design and staging company, Grayland Wayne. So we serve the greater part of Portland Metro. We actually do a lot of business in, or some business in Vancouver, Battleground, as that's growing. So, that's man, what a blessing, right? So I think that in the hospitality industry, people don't realize how important it is to walk into a room and feel comfortable.
Right.
It's almost this, equanimity of you walk in and you just feel at home. And our stagers and designers, they do a wonderful job, making our units feel like they're at home. They stay on trend, and they're scrappy, right? We try to tell them, like, of course, like anybody with a $10,000 budget to, outfit a living room, they could do it, right? Go to West Elm and it's like, boom, done. But if I tell them to do it for $5,000, it's a lot harder and they have to get creative. But that's kind of where we shine. And then the next side of our business is the development company. So that's actually why I, originally talked to Nick. We try to own and operate all of our real estate. So typical GP/LP model. We have, friends and family who are investors. And we try to build ground up if we can. But, the reality is it's a lot harder to find deals that pencil ground up. So we do a lot of rehab projects, and we develop the property, and various timelines on exits and things like that. But right now we have a pretty solid hold model. We're young and we're trying to ride the Portland wave, and we see we think that it's going to be getting better year by year. Hopefully. And then lastly, the construction side. So we have a construction side of the business that we really only take on projects that are $250,000 to $1 million. And we're starting to talk about doing some larger developments. But we mainly partner with, smaller to medium size, GC firms to help us out with the ground up construction if it's more than $1 million.
This is like some serious big boy stuff in terms of, any one of those in its own right, would be like a legit business. But you're not joking as far as having like this incredibly all-encompassing real estate business with vertical integration. And so that does then raise the question for me of like, all right, you're still a pretty young guy. How in the world did you get yourself into this whole world of running boutique hotels through Airbnb and cleaning business, the furniture, staging, development, construction? Bring us now back into the like, all right, what was it just your first job that, all of a sudden you were working in a hotel and you saw the opportunity, or how did this all start?
Funny enough, it started at Quiznos.
That wasn't what I was expecting.
Anybody remembers Quiznos? Like rest in peace. I love that place.
Right. Yeah, those toasted subs, man. That's
amen. I worked at the Quiznos in Oregon City whenever I was in high school. The day I turned 16, I had a job lined up. I did not want to be dependent on my parents. That was like one of the first things that I can remember just being like really gung-ho about. And essentially, my in-laws, my wife actually they lived in Ohio at the time. And my wife actually she's a little older than I am. And she was in high school, a senior in high school in Ohio. So she stayed back in Ohio and, her dad relocated in Portland. And it just so happened that their son, which is my age, he loved one of the subs at Quiznos. So they came in like 4 times a week, and they became like my normals. When they came in, I knew their name, I knew their subs, I knew them like the back of my hand. So, like I said before, my mother-in-law, I call her a serial entrepreneur. The woman cannot, sit down. She is just a hustler. And whenever she moved to, Portland, um, she had to find a business. So she searched around and she ended up finding a pretty rundown consignment shop that was in, our Now furniture store. And she ended up purchasing the business. And basically, while she was ordering subs for about a year and a half, she was doing a very long interview with me. And
Wow.
then she finally asked me, "Hey, you should definitely, work for me."
Wow.
Then I met her daughter and I started dating her daughter.
This is the makings of a country song.
Yeah. It progressed from, subs to love. So I started working for her, and I feel like that was a huge moment. I was in college still. Her husband is my father-in-law, Dwight. He's he's a driving force, not to be reckoned with. So I learned pretty quickly that, like, he's the guy that I need to submit to, and I also need to respect and love, because I wanted to marry his daughter. So, long story short, I started working in the business, and I finally progressed after I graduated from college. I progressed to run the store, and he assisted me. And while we were growing the store, that's when Jody spun off the staging and design company. So she was focusing her attention there, and it gave me the free will to focus my attention on the furniture store and really, take that into my own in my own hands. Turns out my part of my job in the store was to really focus my attention in growing the right customers. Little known fact about the furniture industry: if you only are servicing one-off customers, you'll slowly realize that your marketing budget needs to either increase by 20 to 30%, or you need to figure out a way to get people back cheaper. And I realized that we needed to do some wholesale, or I guess in between wholesale, like design business. And my now business partner, Hayden, he came in, he's young like me. And I remember like it was yesterday, actually, he said, "Hey man, I need 20 couches." And I was like, "Yeah, you don't need 20 couches. Like, blowing smoke." He's like, "No, we have a hotel business. It's our biggest development that we've done, to date. And I need 20 couches in 3 months." So we naturally grew a relationship with each other. Being young, there's not a lot of young people in the industry. Long story short, we actually built like a friendship, right? And we were just friends at that point. Then I moved away. I got another job. It was a sales job, and it was a great experience in St. Louis.
Now, had you gotten married at that point or no?
Yeah. So we got married really young. So right out of college, we got married. Mm-hmm. So we were already married, and my wife was actually managing the design and staging company. I was managing the furniture store, and it was just a good like family dynamic. And then COVID happened, and we had a little COVID baby. So my daughter was going to be born during COVID, and we just discussed the furniture store was closed down, for the time being, and we just discussed as a family, like, okay, should we ride this out? Should we go back to St. Louis, because that's where my father-in-law was working? And my biggest thing was, I always, it's that sense of pride of providing for your family. So I said, look, I'm going to do whatever is right for our family, financially. And I had a job opportunity in St. Louis, Chicago area that I felt like was a good fit. So ended up moving, there, and a year and a half into it, Hayden actually called me and said, "Dude, you gotta join my team. We're really hoping to, grow, and we're always looking for guys, like myself, to grow the team organically." And I took it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, and I love that within this part of your story in life, one, it took time because I think a lot of times it's easy to get swept up in a 30-second Instagram reel or something on social media and think, well, things just happen overnight. But to go from 16 in high school and really this, I'm assuming close to a decade here of
Yeah.
time in different roles and learning different pieces of business and how that operates, you can't underscore that enough. What are some lessons you learned, now? And I think you were being humble. I mean, you guys are running a huge operation. And the first sign that I recognized that was when you said you got 70 cleaning people. I mean, this is a big scale operation and you guys are doing some incredible things. But thinking back, what are some of those skills or things you learned early on before you were in charge that really has helped you along your journey?
Oh man. Yeah. I think whenever I understood nonlinear growth, that really, helped me. It put a lot of things into perspective, right? My father-in-law really is a pivotal, person in my life that, he gave me little one-liners throughout, my early career that really stuck with me. And then coupled with my dad, who isn't necessarily the, definition of like financial success, but the man is, as self-actualized as anybody I've ever met. He just, like he always tells me, Joey, I'm very happy in my own thoughts, you know, and that, that those two driving forces have created a very balanced perspective, if you will. So I think that the nonlinear growth. I remember early in my career I was frustrated because whenever I graduated college, my professors told us that I distinctly remember them telling us that you should make $70,000-$80,000 out of the gate. That was back in 2017. And a $70,000 to $80,000 salary right out of college that's pretty hefty, unless you're in like hard science and of course if you're engineers, nursing, things like that. But I was a business administration and you know uh, uh, slightly IT background. It's not something where that's really like attainable.
Yeah.
And I was finding myself getting impatient with after working for a year, 2 years. I'm like, okay, why is my salary, it's gradually increasing, that like, what, 3%, 4% following CPI.
Yeah.
But why am I not seeing these jumps? Right. I'm getting smarter. I'm working harder. If anything, I'm grinding harder than I ever, back then, harder than I ever did. And I didn't think that the fruits of my labor were, really equal. And, Dwight, he told me multiple times, he's like, dude, there's going to be a time and a place in your career where you slowly climb this, this staircase. But then what happens, you don't even know why it happens. But once you reach a certain point in your career, you just start like your past experience compounds to where you like a massive leap.
Hmm.
And he said that it was the $100,000 mark. He said once you can convince somebody to pay you $100,000, you usually never look back.
Sure.
And once I finally understood that, right, it was 6 years. It took me 6 years to make, that to jump that $100,000 mark. And then after I did that, it was easy. It was almost like there was like this built-in trust, like, oh, okay, so if like if that guy was able to pay you that, then I think that you're worth that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say that was probably one of my biggest, learning lessons.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, kind of taking Nick's question just a slightly different direction. You talk about the time at Quiznos with your now mother-in-law coming in, a year and a half long interview. And then you also talk about your friend that once you moved out to St. Louis, who he called you up and asked you to come and be part of the operation. And you used a phrase, because he wants a guy like you. And I realized that, you seem to be kind of a pretty humble dude. So this might cut against the grain of your personality. But, I'm just curious, like, what are those traits you think that your mother-in-law saw in you, as well as that your friends saw in you, that it's like, I need this guy in my business. I need this guy on my team. I need this guy to help me grow.
Yeah, I'm not very good at talking about myself. So I get excited about other people and like,
yeah, totally. Maybe that's part of what it is, why they need you on the team, because you're so relationally oriented. And
yeah,
that could be your superpower.
I think part of it is, you need to be the light that you want to emit in the world. Right. And I think I really, my mission from the moment that I wake up is to not be a burden on anybody. And whether that's my family, my daughter, my wife, my mom, my dad, my business partners, it doesn't matter. I want to be an asset. And I think that one of my superpowers is I charge people. When I walk into a room and I say good morning and I smile, they feel either slightly annoyed or they actually get a little bit of energy.
Yeah. And I expect it's more the latter than the former.
Yeah, I just, some people, like my wife.
It says more about them if they get annoyed, I think. But
my wife always says, "Are you really that excited about life?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am."
That's awesome.
So yeah, I think that's something. Even at Quiznos, of course, I was a 16-year-old punk, right? I had problems too. I definitely had problems. But with that being said, if I'm already like in the thick of it and in the grind, what is complaining going to do?
Sure.
I've always known that people like to be around positive, energetic people.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge, contributor to, people like gravitating towards the right people.
Yeah. It's a powerful thing to tap into. And so kind of transitioning into building this large and integrated business. What has that journey looked like over the last, it sounds like it's been a couple of years that you've been involved. And so I don't know what direction you want to take it as far as where you've been the most involved in the growth or the things that you're most excited about. But I'd love to just get a little bit more into the nitty gritty of what it's looked like to grow this vertically integrated giant.
Yeah, I think the best starting place is kind of talking about our culture amongst the guys. I always call it the table, right? Like once you get a seat at the table, then your voice is loud. And we always try to enable any of our employees to have a seat at the table, but they have to want it. And part of that culture is we are really, really blunt with each other. And we do not allow anybody to do something that they're just not naturally good at. Right?
Yeah.
It's a balancing act, though, because I'm not naturally good at accounting. Right? I would not say that I'm a spreadsheet guy. Now I have an above knowledge or understanding of bookkeeping or accounting just because of what I do. But it doesn't mean that I'm even close to like Hayden or Jordan, two of my business partners that, they were accounting majors and worked at, big fours, one of the big fours. So with that being said, it's a balancing act of, not neglecting things in your life in the business world that make you well-rounded as a business person. But understanding that, you have to be humble, and that's why you need partners. A CEO has to have a CFO. Right. So we are extremely blunt to a point where you either love us or hate us in the workplace. If I can't tell you when we close the door and we're talking and we're having meetings, I can't tell you how many times people think that we hate each other because we raise our voices, we talk passionately, we don't care about any of our feelings at all, but we love each other, and with that, like my goal is, or my daily goals are involved with the furniture store and the staging company, because, really I'm the best suited for it, within our group of guys.
And I want to camp for just a second on the bluntness and the culture, because everybody loves talking culture within a company. And I think with today's day and age, there's a lot of tiptoeing. There's a lot of don't offend your people, don't really cause big waves or going against the grain. So curious on why you lean into that, but also how does that help your business?
I go back to I don't know if you guys have read the book Sapiens. It's a really interesting book. I highly recommend it. If you're religious or specifically a Christian, you take everything in the book like with a grain of salt, because he purposefully is trying to offend certain groups of people that he just likes to poke the bear. But with that being said, I go back to an age-old rule that people like to spend time with their tribe, and tribes are essentially assimilated groups of individuals. They're all very similar, and we naturally weed out anybody that joins our team that isn't like us. Right. So whether that's, religious beliefs or, stature, how we look. Right. So like, I don't think it's a coincidence that all six of us guys are over 6 foot tall. We all have, fades. We all have like a trimmed beard. Right. Like it is. I think that it would be foolish for us to overlook that.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, I don't hire, based off of somebody's religious preferences.
Sure.
And whether they're good looking and over 6 foot tall. I don't. Right. But what I find is, the majority of the people that we have in our business, I don't have to have a filter.
Right. You're going to attract a certain type of person just based upon the culture that you've developed, and you just kind of, by being out there in the world, you attract your tribe, and you at least repel the extremes that would be like the extreme opposite. The further probably that someone gets away from jiving with your culture, the more they're sort of naturally then repelled from how you all operate. Is that kind of what you're saying?
100%. 100%. And I love discourse. I love having conversations with people that, don't agree with me. I've given up on, political discussions that get heated. I try to take a very stoic approach when it comes to, these like tough conversations. And I try to tell all my team that, because I'm very open about my political opinions and about, my opinions in life, but I also am humble and kind when somebody has different opinions. And frankly, if you can change my mind or give me an alternative to open my mind, I love it.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. We question everybody in our group. We question each other daily,
Yeah.
and it really helps refine how we think.
Yeah. I love the uniqueness of that culture and having that kind of a candor and like an earnest pursuit of truth, that it's like, hey, I'm going to hold my beliefs firmly, but I'm also really curious about people who disagree with me, and retain a openness to the fact that, like, yeah, I could be wrong. I'm willing to be convinced or changed, because the having an understanding of the world reality as it actually is more important to me than merely being right. That's awesome. I'm curious too, just kind of as you've been in the business and building, like what sort of competitive advantage you think that culture has given you, or maybe even a story comes to mind where having that kind of candor among your team has really led to either decisions or acting quickly or doing things that you think have directly led to the growth of the business that might not have happened if people weren't so free to speak their mind.
Yeah, that's good. I think it lessens the bottlenecks in any company.
Yeah.
There has to be flow. Um, Especially with the last 2 years have been extremely turbulent. Our business is directly affected, like a lot of other businesses, but are directly affected by interest rates.
Yeah.
And real estate specifically.
Yeah.
So, I think that with our employees, and then the partners, we do not like when feelings get in the way of growth. We
Yeah.
really try to break that down. And it's hard to explain. I wish that you guys could be a fly on the wall in one of our meetings, because it makes it seem like, or I make it seem like we're just rude, like viciously rude to each other.
Yeah.
When we're not.
And I believe that, like, and I'm glad that you qualify, because I've been in those rooms and I know, like myself, how good that can be when you have a group of people that have, like you were saying, profound love and just like deep respect for one another. And so actually the ability to speak freely without having to qualify everything and without having to be so polite, it actually makes the conversation more efficient and speaks to the depth of respect that you have for one another, to be able to go kind of toe to toe without worrying about it. So I am glad you qualify, and I hope for our listen, like for anybody who hasn't experienced that, I think it is kind of a hard concept to wrap your head around, but it's kind of, I imagine it feels more like a family at the table, where it's like we love each other no matter what, but we're gonna shoot it straight. So, not to interrupt you, but just to say I'm tracking.
You're exactly right. I always, compare it to whenever I first started dating my wife, Jess, and now, like now that we're married and we've been married for almost 7-8 years, there's a different comfortability with each other.
Right.
Like,
right.
She can tell me exactly how she feels. She knows that I'll love her, stay by her side, and support her. Yeah. And before, she had to like tiptoe around things. She was still learning things about me. Where, my business partners, I know them very well.
Yeah.
Something like, frankly, probably too well. And, that's the beauty of it, though, because like our, like with our employees, for example, some of them know me better than others, but they all know that I am not I don't lead by fear or with fear.
Yeah.
Right. I really, really like when they come to me and they question me, but then they have to be comfortable with me telling them, no, that was stupid. That's not a good idea. Mm-hmm. And I'm not, of course, others are, like I have to do, it's my job to make sure that I understand them. Cause I have a spectrum of employees, delivery guys to, designers who have never paid for anything in their life. And you know what I mean? Like have been coddled their whole life. So like there's a spectrum of people that we work with that I need to have the emotional intelligence to know that they are different and they perceive messages different.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I think one of the stories that comes to mind is I was, I got ahead of myself. We were doing really well in 2022 at the furniture store, and we had a billboard, and billboard cost roughly $3,000 a month, give or take. You know, I was looking at our P&L, and I think, okay, I can shave off. We don't need that billboard. Is it really helping? I can shave off 36K off our bottom line, and that's going to go straight to our top line. So
Right.
I cut it, and slowly but surely in 6-7 months, our sales started to progressively decline.
Hmm.
And guys, it took me my business partner basically slapping my face in a meeting, saying like we had to investigate. We could not figure out what was wrong. That's a part of business, right? Like a lot of these things are not black and white. And we still don't know if that was the one thing, but we think that it was, like my ignorance of how important marketing is, and how you got to spend a little bit of money to make a little bit of money. And if my business partner would have never, just spoke up and said, "Joey, you're an idiot. Why did you do that?" Right? Then we wouldn't have switched it over, and put it back up. And then on that note, don't let your pride get in the way of your growth.
I love that.
Totally.
And that's something that, heck, being a father, that teaches you, that lesson very quickly.
Right.
But, especially in the workplace, we try to tame our ego every single day and realize that we're not perfect. And we need to be okay with making mistakes, big or small. Just own up to them and move on.
As you continue to share, what I hear is, and it starts with the fact that you're in the people business, being in hospitality, but all the way to the employees you have, the culture you create, and then the team around you. And, there's a lot of folks who they lean in and say, well, I can do it better than everybody else. It's just going to be me. And they're going to try to wear all the hats, the quote unquote solopreneur. But you've recognized how it's absolutely essential to have this team around you. What are some other maybe benefits or some other things that have allowed your business to grow to the scale that it has, simply because you've recognized, hey, I'm strong here, other people are strong here? Speak more to that relational dynamic and just the people involved.
Nick, I could talk for hours specifically about the benefits of having business partners. I know everybody always asks me, like, are you worried about your risk? It only takes a couple of those guys, the pivotal members in our group. It only takes a couple of those guys to get divorced or to, become alcoholics or go off the deep end. Who knows, right? Like, if their life turns, your life will turn, Joey. Right? Like you're basically strapped to them. And there's a lot of truth there. I think that human beings are volatile.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, choose wisely. Make sure that your business partners are just as important as your wife or partner. Because you're stuck with them for a very long time.
Right.
And, in my belief, forever. So it's a big decision. And I think it requires getting to know them to a deeper level than just looking at their financial spreadsheet and their resume.
Sure.
But on that note, I think probably the one of my biggest limiting factors or limiting beliefs is I've always had an irrational fear of being poor. Growing up, lower middle class, and seeing what 2008 did to my parents, 2008, 2009 did to my parents, it really set me back. From a financial perspective, I would frequently step over dollars to pick up nickels, that whole adage, right?
Yeah.
And having partners has really opened up my eyes because, we're all in a blessed position now where I could call any of them for a reasonable amount of money. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they, we have each other's back. If I make a mistake with a billboard and our sales drop for the furniture store, I'm still going to be able to feed my family.
Yeah.
Right. And in business, you want to be able to take calculated risks. And unfortunately, you can't get away from, pretty much every decision is risk bearing.
Yeah.
So having partners that give you the peace of mind financially, but then also a big one is, having partners to share the stress with.
Right.
Dear Lord, man, it is so stressful.
Yeah.
There's so, especially with, like how regulatory, doing business in Portland is, right? Like you have, the corporate tax, you have, Multnomah tax, you have, then you're doing Oregon state tax and then federal tax. Like I could go on for hours
about taxes.
And, having business partners to share the load when you get sick or, you have to stay home because your daughter's sick. It's a great feeling to feel supported.
Yeah.
And another big one for me, I think it's really important to, hang around folks that are a lot smarter than you. And I've never felt comfortable being the smartest guy in the room. It makes me lazy. So, my business partners, their IQ is 20, 30, potentially 40 points higher than me. They're
awesome.
Just like a couple of them are so intelligent. So I think that's a huge part of my need and want for business partners.
Yeah, it's inspiring to be around. I mean, people that are constantly pushing you to be better. It sounds like an amazing dynamic where they're not just your partners, but your friends. As you're talking about like having partners to share the stress with, I was reminded of this quote that I love. It's related to friendship. It talks about how friendship is the relationship that halves our sorrows and doubles our joy. And I feel like that's probably true of a good business partnership as well, that it's like when the crap hits the proverbial fan and it is really stressful and tough, it's really nice to be able to share that with a bunch of people who, one, feel it like you do, and also are just as committed to getting through it and solving it. But then also in the good times when things are going well, to have people to celebrate that with and to really enjoy the good times, like that's an awesome dynamic to have. Now, you spoke to how people have sounded the alarm on the risk of partnership. It's funny, as Nick and I have looked at several different business opportunities together. That's been one of the recurring themes that he and I have heard. It almost makes it a little awkward sometimes when we're in a meeting with a business owner and he's like, "Hey, really think carefully about your partner. Really make sure that this is the person you want to be working working with or whatever.
I give you the side eye, Nick.
Yeah, exactly. So I am curious, just, it seems like it's gone so incredibly well for you. For somebody who is kind of vetting a partner or thinking about entering into a partnership, what are the qualities that you would encourage them to look for, or the ways that to test that relationship, or just kind of the markers to know, yeah, this seems like either a positive partnership, or hey, these are some of the warning flags of like, this might not be somebody that you want to enter in with, beyond the resume and financial statements like you'd mentioned, that don't tell the whole story.
Sure. Yeah. That's a tough question. I think the first one is character. Like I had there's this big joke. I'm the only guy in our group that doesn't smoke cigars.
Okay.
Right? And they love giving me these like crazy scenarios. One of them was like, would you smoke a cigar if I had, $5 million in a briefcase and I was going to give it to you, right? Like one puff, and you know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that unwavering character, if I'm not going to smoke a cigar for free, I'm not going to smoke a cigar for $5 or $100 or $5 million. It's part of me. That's just something I don't do.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I have this, I probably would do it for $5 million.
Character broke down.
But it's what I told them, they all laughed at this. I said, guys, it's less about the, I don't think I'll be a bad person if I do that, but there's a certain respect factor. Like I told you about my dad and my father-in-law. I really, a sense of my pride is respecting them, and both of them just so happen to despise smoking anything. And in the back of my mind, I would rather not take $5 million than disappoint them.
Sure.
And I said, okay, I'll tell you guys something funny. If my father-in-law and my dad were sitting down and they had a cigar in their hand and were like, hey, Joey, do you want to smoke a cigar? I would probably say yes.
Yeah.
It's not that I want to smoke a cigar. I want to be like them so bad.
Yeah.
And emulate them so badly. But they deserve it. Like it's not like I'm not jealous of them. I'm not, like they have earned this right to my obedience and my respect. So that's something that I'm, like to give you a little bit of backstory on character. I'm not going to sell my soul for anything I don't believe in. And make sure that your business partners believe in the same thing that you do. And make sure it's really hard for them, or a very lucrative number, to sell their soul if they're going to do it. Because all of us are driven by money, some more than others. But you want to make sure that nobody's going to do anything corrupt because they're going to, make a little extra money.
Yeah.
And then I think the next thing is, it's pretty important for people to have a good relationship with their family. In my mind, at least. I think that at least their parents, because that's typically a sign of a pretty strong individual, where, all of us guys are egomaniacs. I know, I at least the average Joe. And we can put our ego aside and respect and love our family. And I think that's a huge, it's a huge factor of just being a wholesome person.
Yeah.
I think the third thing, it's tough because a couple of our guys are not married yet, and which is totally fine, but they treat women with respect. And that's something that we've all kind of been in the same like we all have like the same idea of like you need to you just need to be respectful to your partner.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have, there's certain nonsense that happens in the world that some cultures or some, folks are, they're willing to give their friends a lot more grace than they would give the boyfriend of their sister. Right. That kind of thing. And we are the antithesis of that. Right. Like my business partners, if I ever am acting in a way, if I'm like talking about my wife because she's like annoying me or something like that, which I'm not, that doesn't happen very often. But if it does happen where I'm venting or something like that, they're the first ones to tell me, Joey, dude, that's a you problem, man.
Yeah.
You need to look in the mirror. So, which is really helpful. It's like, I'm constantly getting gut checked, to be, a stronger partner, a better business partner, a better son, a better friend, right? Like just being a better human being, a better person.
Yeah. And those are all great. And I think that on one hand, those are really deep and complex, but on the other hand, as someone's looking and thinking through business partners, it's simple. I mean, it's a lot of the similar things that most of us were taught growing up of character and humility and treating others well and not wishing ill on others or thinking ill of others, but being that type of person. And then I think naturally, like you've said, that gravity there brings other people around you who have those similar shared values and want to go in the same direction. And so I think that's a great answer. To shift just a little bit here, I am curious, and I want to specifically talk about the hospitality side of the business and the Airbnbs, because those in many ways have been the darling of real estate investors for the last few years. You guys have done it better than most, if not all. But I think in that, what are some misconceptions out there from quote unquote experts that you hear or you see and you're like, wow, those people are leading others astray? So maybe what are some known, things about the Airbnb industry that you're like, yeah, no, I'm in it. That's not right.
One of the biggest misconceptions is if you want to grow and you want to manage more than one or two units, you need to understand that this is a full-time job. This is not a long-term rental. I had long-term rentals before. I was, doing any Airbnbs with, Hayden and my partners. And it's a lot more passive. And short-term rentals are a 9-to-5 job. Right? We have, and I'm not exaggerating, over, 300 to 500 messages a day coming from our guests. We have, today, I think we have like 88 cleans, 88 turnovers. On our busy days, we have 250 turnovers or 220 turnovers. And those aren't exact numbers, by the way, so don't quote me. But like I said, it's hard work. And you can't hire a management company. You'll quickly find out that you can't hire a management company that charges a considerable more amount of money on gross than long term. Rightfully so, because it's harder, and still be profitable. So people get in this horrible trap where they own several Airbnbs. They naturally grow to the point where they're like, holy crap, I can no longer do this myself anymore. But I also don't want to manage employees. So I'm going to try to outsource, whether it's my management or my cleaning or my maintenance. And then their profits just go to crap. So that's the first thing. It's a lot harder than people think. And then the second thing, especially during the good times, I call it the good times because, money was so cheap. People were buying properties and they had no regard for their basis in the property. So I could not even believe the prices that people were buying some of these properties. And during the good times where debt is extremely cheap and everybody's traveling, there was still stimulus money moving around. So you were renting your units, making 20% more than, what you typically should. But the property's penciled, right? And you could buy the property at a 15 to 20%, increased basis. But then during the hard times, like right now, it's becoming a lot harder. The property is no longer penciled. And I cannot, we do not. So we have investors. We have several investors that, the first thing that I tell them is, hey, we have extremely stringent underwriting and we're extremely conservative. So if you question, why our underwriting looks like it's on the lower end of the spectrum of returns, it's because we are playing it as safe as we possibly can, but still being realistic. And we've lost investors like that because some people they like to see higher returns. They're like, no, I could get an additional 6% on X, Y, or Z. And in the back of my head, I want to tell them, hey, dude, there's a very good chance that we'll get you that same return. But at the same time, I don't want to set the precedent and tell them, hey, I'm going to get you a 16% return. But our goal is just giving you an 8% return. We don't need to give you a false expectation just to get you excited, to get you on the hook. So yeah, those two things I would say are, the biggest misconceptions with Airbnb.
I love that the commitment to, as much as possible, under promise and over deliver. And that's a refreshing take in the world of real estate investing, especially in the last couple of years where it feels like it's been a lot of the opposite of these grand promises for returns. And then, whoop, didn't account for interest rates or whatever. I just one more question on the Airbnb front. I love that you're in the Portland metro area. I love what you're doing with the boutique hotels. I'm curious, Portland gets a lot of crap in the media. There's been a lot of hard times in Portland. There's also been a lot of question marks just about Airbnb and short-term rentals in general, and if that's still a strong industry. Since you're in it, curious kind of your bull case for Airbnb or for Portland market. You said you're hopeful and optimistic. Of course, I don't want you to give away any sort of like insider secrets or baseball here, but just curious what your bull take is. What are you seeing that's making you optimistic?
Yeah, we are very particular about what we purchase because we actually legally convert all of our properties into hotels.
Cool.
So we take residential property that has specific zoning. It just so happens to be residential property. It's been used as residential property. And we convert it into the same exact zoning as you see on, any Marriott or Hilton, and I think that is something that, it's, I guess, our secret sauce, if you will.
Yep.
And it's not me doing the conversion, by the way. I help with the construction and manage the projects. But going back to my, one of my business partners, Hayden, that is just a little boy genius. He has, understood these very complex developments and conversion processes. Yeah. So that's one thing that, frankly, the stricter Airbnb is in the city of Portland, honestly, the better for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I try to tell people that all the time. A lot of our investors will send me articles like, "Oh, are you scared? What about this?" And don't get me wrong, it's going to make it harder, right? Like, there are more hoops for us to jump through. But it's very, just to boil it down in layman's terms, when you are restricting the supply, demand, there has to be this, there's going to be a demand, and the demand is going to maintain. And what I tell people all the time, Portland has its problems. I'm not hiding that. I think that there's a lot of crap going on in Portland, especially the past 2 years. That was just a disgrace. But with that being said, travel around to other cities and you will be amazed with how freaking awesome Portland is after you come back, especially in the summertime, right? Or especially in the wintertime even, right? Like I lived in, I worked in Memphis, Chicago, St. Louis, Iowa City. It's not as glamorous as people think.
Yeah.
And there's definitely pros in all cities and cons in all cities. But, Portland has an incredible food scene. We have the best, it's world-class coffee that you can literally walk, go into, central east side, and I can walk to 3 coffee shops that I love and adore in a matter of like 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
We have the cuisine here is, I call it like, it's fast casual fine dining.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that is, that is so rare to find.
Right.
Some of the best food that you'll eat in the United States, is here. And then there's obviously, right outside of the city, you have so many things, at your fingertips. It's the same thing with Vancouver, by the way, like Vancouver has besides the disgusting traffic going there, it's incredible too. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I see why people live there.
Yeah.
So I think that Portland is in a nutshell is it can only go up from here.
Yep.
And it is getting better. The homelessness problem is getting better. The graffiti problem is getting better. They just took away or brought back Measure 110, I guess, or abolished 110. So now, I don't think that we're going to have the massive, or at least simmer down the fentanyl crisis and some of the drug issues.
Yeah.
Homeless camps, big one. That's been probably one of the biggest problems in Portland. And they're finally starting to fight that. It's an uphill battle too, though, because I don't think it's just a Portland problem. I think it's a Supreme Court issue. And
it's not just here in Portland. It's all across the nation trying to figure out these issues. But yeah,
totally,
yeah. Well, I love that bold case. I appreciate both on the Airbnb and the Portland side, and I feel it. There's a magic about the city of Portland. It's I think it is one of the most beautiful cities on earth. As somebody who's traveled to many cities, it just anywhere you go, it's beautiful. So that's very exciting. But Nick, I think you had something lined up, and then I jumped in.
No, all good. Well, as we get to wrap this thing up, and thinking through our conversation, there's been a lot of how, there's been a lot of significance on your journey, people and investment. Let's pivot just here at the end to a little bit of the why and what drives you. You've mentioned the family, but, my mind oftentimes goes to, you're managing hundreds of properties, you got hundreds of employees, and I think it's easy to take your foot off the gas. I think it's easy to coast. I think it's easy to say, well, look what I've built. But there's that humility. There's that continual grind. And so with that framework, let's shift to our gold nugget rounds here. And, we normally fire these 4 questions at all of our guests. But I think they get a little bit more to the why. So we talk at Abundant Journey on the 5 F's. I want you to pick one here and tell us what you're working on this year to continue to grow. And so we got family, faith, fitness, finance, and future. Which one of those do you want to tackle and just say, hey, this is what fuels my why?
Man, it's all encompassing, but I would say that this year specifically, I'm trying to focus a little bit more on faith. my family and I started to go to church routinely. Um, we go to BCC in Beaverton. It's a wonderful church. If any of your listeners are local, I would highly recommend going there. And my wife did a class called Rooted. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But it's like a Wednesday night small group. And I have a hard time lessening my workload, and I'm pretty set, working my 70, 75 hours a week. So I told her I'm not going to do that. But Sundays I spend with my family. That's like the day that I dedicate to my family. So with that being said, she said after Rooted, she's like, hey, there's an after group that we do on Sundays. So I would like you to do that. So then I was like, okay, I spend it with my families. I'm going to do it. Man, it's been great.
Cool.
Diving into my faith, and I'm a big reader. I like to read, and I found myself. I know this is a very polarizing opinion. The Bible bores the crap out of me, so I've never actually sat down and read it, but it was one of those gasping moments whenever I said that in the small group, because I'm a very genuine person. I do not try to BS people or make them think that I hate hypocrites. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they all were talking about the Bible, and they asked my opinion. I'm like, oh, it bores me. I've never read it. And right,
I can imagine the gasp.
Yeah, my wife was like,
dude, like, I love it. I respect your honesty so much. So just know that. But having been in those circles, I can totally hear it.
Yeah. So they challenged me. They said, dude, you read Meditations, you read Sapiens, you read about, Sam Zell or, Steven Schwartzman or, I do. I'm guilty of it. So I've started reading the Bible. And I'm connecting with it a little bit more and understanding, the actual theology about it. And I've always found this profound faith in me. I contribute that to my mom. She's just she's always been by my side through thick and thin, even through the times where I was just a complete butthead. And I've always found that she grounded herself and her love in her faith in Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always made me feel very comfortable in my journey. And I think that I'm trying to do my best to learn the other side of faith, which is actually the the nitty gritty, the factual, the theological significance of what my faith makes me feel like. So before, when people were quoting Bible verses and discussing various chapters in the Old Testament or the New Testament, I would nod my head and be a part of the conversation, but I never could really speak to it. And I think that's a big part of my journey this year specifically.
Love it.
Trying to do a better job understanding it.
That's great. Well, and in that same vein, as you say, you like to be a reader. Next question here. What's a quote from a book or mentor that has stuck with you on your journey?
Oh, man. I write down all my quotes because I have a horrible memory.
It's a smart practice, man. There's so many people that I've tried to get into the habit of that myself. Whenever I come across something that it's like, I want to remember that. That was so good. Because if I don't write it down, it's gone.
Miserable, man. I'm like my calendar. I would have skipped this podcast if I didn't have it in my calendar.
Right.
Okay, so this isn't really a quote. It's a small passage that I really like it. I preach being flexible in our business, because it's when you're too rigid and you want to follow your schedule and you get anxious because of your schedule, you'll find yourself being pretty miserable.
Mm-hmm.
At least I found myself being pretty miserable. Um, so it's, imagine that there's an oak tree. And when you're looking at the oak tree that resists the wind loses its branches one by one. With nothing left to protect it, the trunk finally snaps. But the oak tree that bends will live longer. Its trunk grows wider and the roots deeper and more tenacious.
Mm.
So that was one that really spoke to me, that I really like to, I go back to these small, whether it's scripture or passages of the books that I'm reading, anytime, there's issues. I call it grounding myself, anytime that I'm in a pretty like stressful state. Now it still physically messes with me because I have gray hair, but, like overall, it resets me and brings me some solstice. And then I would say the other one, I'll find it right here. I really liked it. It's Epictetus, and something that I think a lot of folks, especially the younger generation, have a problem with is this whole idea of like FOMO, right? I didn't even know what that was until I talked to one of the younger gals that works for me. But she's always nervous that she's going to be missing out on something. And she wants to like make the best of all, like as many things as possible. And, I just naturally don't have that, maybe a little bit, but, I tend to just like being by myself or with people, or like if I don't get invited to something, I'm like, that's totally fine. I don't care. And so Epictetus said, when children stick their hand down a narrow goody jar, they can't get their full fist out and they start to cry. You have to drop a few treats and you will get it out. Curb your desire. Don't set your heart on so many things and you will get what you need.
It's good.
So that was a big one for me. Whenever I read that, I just, it really gravitated with me, because I think part of business too is, once you have, let's say, $10,000, there's so many places that you can put that $10,000, right? Cryptocurrency is a perfect example. All of my friends told me to invest in cryptocurrency. I probably would have made a lot of money. I don't know. Maybe I would have. But frankly, I don't know anything about it. So I need to stay focused on what I do know, which is the real estate side and the hospitality side and our furniture. So it's just, stay in my lane, and I don't need to have the FOMO. I don't need to be scared of missing out on it.
Totally. No, I love that answer, and those are awesome quotes. Ones I haven't heard, but I need to remember, or at least write them down as well. So, last one here. At the end of your journey, at the end of your life, what do you hope you'll be remembered for?
I think going back to the energy, bringing energy to any situation, and I really want people to maintain that energy and try to create this infectious culture. Because I think that's the only way that we're going to solve the majority of our complex problems in the world. You dumb it down, to something as simple as just going into a room and smiling, and being a lovable person. And I think other than that, if we had more time, I would explain it a little bit more in depth. But basically, don't be a hypocrite. Speak your truth and walk your walk, and be proud while you're doing it. And it's okay to be different.
It's a great message, man. And I love how you're living that both personally and the way that you're embodying that in the business that you're building. And man, I both wish you all the success in the world, and also have all the confidence that you guys are going to blow it out of the water in whatever you do. So for listeners that want to connect with you, follow along with your journey, see more of what you're building, what are the best places for them to go to follow along? You got social media or websites that you want them to visit?
Yeah, I think, going to the furniture stores, social media pages, and then if you're a realtor, using our staging services. Man, I can't speak high enough of the team.
Yeah.
What's New Furniture on the corner of Grand and Stark, and then Graylin Wayne. We're not as client facing in terms of public facing, but you can find us online. We have social media pages as well that are pretty accessible, and we love our clients and our customers. And you're the only reason why we're in business, right? Like, you're the only reason why, we get to, have fun and have these conversations. So I can't speak high enough of, the patrons, of our small business. And frankly, dude, what you guys are doing, it's something that we've always, my business partners and I have always talked about too, like just connecting with community. That is just it's such a blessing, talking to, two guys that I can tell they care, and, you live compassionate lives. You love your families. Nick, Nick Zolk, I talked to you at coffee, and, you spoke so highly of your wife and your kids. Talk about positive energy, right? And the other Nick, I haven't, talked to you that much, but I'm sure, it's the same for you, right? And that's really important. You're putting that energy out into the world, which is infectious. And that's the energy that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate that so much. And, like you were talking about earlier with just attracting that tribe, building that tribe, hopefully by putting that out there, we're continuing to connect with more and more people that have that same sort of desire. And it's been amazing. So, yeah, couldn't be more grateful for your time engaging with us here, sharing with us, sharing with our listeners. Listeners, do check out the links in the show notes so that you can connect with Joey, check out the furniture store, check out the staging business, follow along with all that he's doing there. And then also check out abundantjourney.net, where you can find a full library of all of our episodes, resources, things to share with your friends, and to inspire you in your entrepreneurial journey in pursuit of an abundant life. So I think that's all we got. Thanks, everybody.
See you next time.